Forget what you learned in school. Forget the jargon, the complex graphs, and the theories that feel disconnected from your real life. The economy isn't some mysterious force decided in boardrooms and government halls. It's a machine. And it's a surprisingly simple machine that dictates the price of your coffee, your chances of getting a raise, and the massive economic waves that can lift you up or drag you down. The parts of this machine are surprisingly human. In the next 20 minutes, we're going to connect the dots between the simple fact that we can't have everything, the prices you pay every day, and the giant cycles of boom and bust that determine our collective fate. By the end, you won't just hear noise when you listen to the news. You'll understand the gears of the economic machine turning. It all starts with a simple, unavoidable truth. You can't have everything. This is the idea of scarcity. Our unlimited wants running into limited resources. It's the foundation of all economics. Every choice you make, from buying a latte to changing careers, is an economic decision because you have to give something up to get it. Economists call that an opportunity cost, and it's what gets the entire global economy moving. So, let's start with the smallest part of the machine, the one you interact with every single day. Let's zoom in on a single transaction. You walk into a cafe and buy a coffee. That's it. That's the atom of the economic machine. You have money and you want coffee more than you want that money. The cafe has coffee, and they want your money more than they want that coffee. When you both agree on a price, a transaction happens. You've exchanged money for a good. This simple act is really a vote. You're signaling to the market that you value this coffee at this price. If enough people make the same vote, the cafe owner might hire another barista or even open a new location. If nobody buys the coffee, the cafe goes out of business. Every single purchase you make sends a tiny ripple through the economy. Now, let's zoom out and see where those ripples go. The economy is really just two groups interacting. On one side, you have households. That's you and me. We have two main things to offer: our work and our money. On the other side, you have firms, which is just a fancy word for businesses. And businesses need our labor to create goods and services. This creates a simple, continuous loop. Households provide labor to firms, and in exchange, firms pay us income as wages. That's the first half of the loop. Now, we take that income and spend it on the goods and services that firms produce. That money flows right back to the firms as revenue. So labor flows to businesses, and income flows back to people. Goods flow to people, and revenue flows back to businesses. This is the engine room of the economy. When this loop spins faster, the economy grows. More jobs are created, more goods are sold, and incomes rise. When it slows down, the economy shrinks. This simple cycle of making and buying, working and earning, is what we call economic activity. For thousands of years, this basic loop was pretty much the whole story. But then, we invented a tool that supercharged the machine: credit. Credit is just the ability to buy something now with a promise to pay for it later. When you use a credit card, take out a student loan, or get a mortgage, you're pulling your future spending into today. This feels like a miracle. It lets you buy a house you couldn't afford with cash, or lets a company build a factory it couldn't otherwise fund. Credit makes the economic loop spin dramatically faster because it lets us spend more than we earn. And since one person's spending is another person's income, more credit leads to more spending, which leads to higher incomes. This makes people feel richer and encourages them to borrow even more. This is what creates an economic boom. It also creates debt, and debt is a promise you made to your future self. At some point, the future arrives, and you have to spend less than you earn to pay it back. When this happens on a massive scale, when everyone starts paying back debt at the same time, spending grinds to a halt. Incomes fall, and the economic machine sputters. This is a recession. This up and down is called a short-term debt cycle. It typically lasts 5 to 8 years, and it's driven by human nature. Our tendency to get optimistic and borrow too much, followed by the painful reality of paying it back. But this is just one small wave. There's a much bigger one moving underneath. Given our tendency to boom and bust, two major players were created to try and keep the machine from breaking down: the government and the central bank. Think of them as the rule makers, trying to smooth out the bumps of the debt cycle. First, you have the government. The government can influence the economy through what's called fiscal policy, a fancy term for taxes and spending. If the economy is slowing, the government can try to speed it up by cutting taxes, leaving more money in our pockets to spend, or by spending money directly on things like infrastructure projects. This idea is often called a Keynesian approach, which argues for government intervention to boost demand during a slump. On the flip side, if the economy is growing too fast and causing prices to rise too quickly, that's inflation, the government might raise taxes or cut spending to slow things down. The other rule maker is the central bank. In the United States, that's the Federal Reserve, or the Fed. The Fed's main tool is monetary policy, which is all about controlling the amount of money and credit in the economy. They do this mainly by setting interest rates. When the Fed lowers interest rates, it gets cheaper to borrow money. This encourages us and businesses to take on more debt, spend more, and boost the economy. When the Fed raises interest rates, borrowing becomes more expensive. This discourages spending, encourages saving, and cools down the economy to fight inflation. As of early 2026, the Fed's federal funds rate is in the 4.25% to 4.50% range, a move made to combat persistent inflation after a series of global supply shocks. These two rule makers are constantly pulling these levers, trying to keep the machine running smoothly without overheating or stalling. The main dial they're all watching is gross domestic product, or GDP, which is the total value of all goods and services produced in a country. A growing GDP means the economy is expanding. A shrinking GDP for 2 quarters in a row signals a recession. The U.S. economy, for instance, showed continued expansion with real GDP growth of 2.4% in the last quarter of 2025. So, let's put it all together. You have the basic loop of people working and buying. You have the short-term debt cycle creating booms and busts every 5 to 8 years. And you have the government and central bank trying to manage it all. But there's one more layer: the long-term debt cycle. Over decades, something subtle happens. Each time the economy gets into trouble, the central bank lowers interest rates to fix it. But after the crisis, they often don't raise them back to where they were before. Over many cycles, interest rates slowly creep toward zero. At the same time, the total amount of debt in the economy keeps rising. Eventually, you can reach a point where debts are enormous, and interest rates are already at or near zero. At this point, the central bank's main tool, lowering rates, stops working. The machine is so clogged with debt that it can't be stimulated anymore. This is the peak of the long-term debt cycle, a moment that happens only every 50 to 75 years or so. When this happens, you get a major deleveraging, a period where the entire system has to shed its debt. This can happen in a few painful ways: through harsh spending cuts, massive debt write-offs, or, most commonly, the central bank printing a lot of money to make the debt more manageable. We saw this after the 2008 financial crisis and during the global pandemic, which also caused a massive supply shock that disrupted supply chains and pushed prices up. Recent conflicts and tariffs have acted as further supply shocks, showing just how vulnerable our interconnected economy can be. These long-term waves are what separate everyday recessions from historic depressions. They set the economic weather for an entire generation. So, the economy isn't a mystery. It's a machine built from a few simple parts. It starts with a transaction, driven by scarcity and choice. That transaction powers the flow of income between all of us and businesses. Credit then supercharges this flow, creating short-term cycles of boom and bust. The government and central bank act as mechanics, using taxes, spending, and interest rates to try and keep the machine stable, all while watching that master gauge, GDP. And this all plays out across huge, generation-spanning waves of long-term debt. So, the next time you hear about interest rates, a government stimulus plan, or a supply chain bottleneck, you won't just hear noise. You'll understand the gears of the economic machine turning. You'll see the connection between that headline and the price of your lunch, the security of your job, and the value of your savings. You now have the framework to see how the economy actually works. If this video helped you connect the dots, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We release videos every week that break down the complex forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.